Passionate, driven, enthusiastic, euphoric. This is who we are as entrepreneurs. But how we leverage these incredible attributes to dream and build businesses that scale and grow is what this podcast is all about. Hello, I'm attorneypreneur Josh Brown, and welcome to Franchise Euphoria. Hello, everybody. Josh Brown here, back for another episode of Franchise Euphoria. Hope you are doing fantastic. I know I am. Really excited for the spring right now. The weather's turning, feeling warmer. I don't know where you're listening from, but I'm in Indiana where it has been cold, but we are finally turning that corner. So I am super psyched about that. Today, again, you're just going to get me, no interview today, but I do want to talk about something that is really something that a lot of people have asked me about, first and foremost, but also I'm seeing more and more questions regarding this. And that is, when you go and buy a franchise, should you just look at buying one franchise, or should you look at the opportunity of becoming an area developer for that franchise system? Now, you may not even know what that is. And so let me take a minute here to explain that. When you look at buying a franchise, a lot of times a franchise system, if you are one of the first in a particular state or in a particular area, or if a franchisor is looking to expand perhaps rapidly, or just perhaps they want to expand through one particular area, they will look for what's called an area developer. And what that is somebody who is really kind of a quasi franchisor and franchisee, because typically with an area developer, what's required by the franchisor just in general is that the person who is the area developer for, let's say it's a particular state. Let's say you have an area developer for the state of Indiana for some franchise, and their job is to help that franchisor expand through the state of Indiana. Well, most of the times they have to actually be a franchisee themselves. So they have to usually purchase one or perhaps several franchises within the state, but then they're also charged with the responsibility of developing the entire territory that they're provided. And for ease of an example here, let's just say it's the whole state of Indiana. So an area developer might be charged with not only running their own franchise, but also growing the franchise network through the entire state of Indiana. And for a lot of people, this is a really interesting and exciting opportunity. And in many instances, it can work really well, but you do need to consider what it is you're getting into and some of the pitfalls that have really hampered people along the way. So one of the things that I see when people are area developers, one of the problems that they have is how fast they have to develop an area, because within any kind of area developer agreement, which is a separate legal document that you're going to have to sign in addition to the franchise agreement, because remember, you're going to have to be a franchisee for that system. You're going to have to run and manage and operate your own franchise as a franchisee. So that's going to subject you to a separate franchise agreement and the franchise disclosure documents and whatnot. But then to be an area developer, that's a whole separate agreement. And that's really where now you are put on essentially a time frame to develop out your territory. So let's say, again, back to my example, that you are developing a system throughout the state of Indiana. And this particular franchisor has split up Indiana into 5 territories. What typically will happen is there'll be a schedule that's associated with your area developer agreement as an attachment, and it'll break out by year when you have to have certain locations open, or in other words, when you have the time frame within which you have to find other people to purchase the franchise. And if you don't stay within that time frame, technically you are in breach of that agreement, and your area development relationship can be terminated. This happens all the time. And so it's a very, very, very big risk whenever you're putting yourself on a timetable over a significant period of time. Let's say it's 5, 6, 7 years to develop a whole territory. I mean, gosh, there's a whole lot of things that can happen over that time frame. And that's typically where problems arise, in that a franchisor can be doing well and maybe the economy is particularly good for that business. But over a period of time, things change. Things change on a national level, things change on a state and local level. And so the impact of that over time can significantly impact your ability as the area developer to build out that brand within the state, or within the state of Indiana, for this example. And so, but you don't get a pass for that. You don't get a pass because the economy took a turn. You don't get a pass because something in your industry went astray. And so this is something you really need to give really significant thought to before you sign on the dotted line, because just like a franchise agreement, you are paying an upfront fee to the franchisor for the opportunity to be an area developer. And what you have to gain from that is that usually you get a split royalty for the areas that you develop. So not only are you operating your own franchise business, you're generating revenues there, and then you're paying royalties back to the franchisor from your own franchise business. But then as you develop a territory and you bring people in and they open up the franchise, now the royalty that they pay back to the franchisor, you get a piece of. And so you are incentivized from that perspective, and you can do quite well with that model. But you do have to be careful, because if you don't meet the timeline within which the franchise wants to expand, that can be grounds for termination, and you can lose your entire investment. Of course, there's many, many more things to consider when you are looking to become an area developer. But for this particular episode, I just wanted to focus on the timeline and the schedule that all franchisors put their area developers on, because it's really become a more prominent issue, at least as I've seen it over the years. I think part of that is there's been obviously a big push for franchises to expand faster. I think people see the economics of that. And so franchisors are typically always in a rush to expand. And sometimes they don't give as much forethought as they should for the system. But also because obviously the opportunities that come about if you are a successful area developer is very attractive to people. And so that gives people the incentive to want to do it. But again, you need to pump the brakes. You need to do your due diligence. You need to sit back and think about all the possibilities, both positive and negative, to really give yourself a fair assessment as to whether or not being an area developer is the right thing for you. Perhaps you just want to focus on being a franchisee and maybe look at becoming a multi-unit owner of a franchise. So maybe you own multiple units as opposed to being an area developer, where you have that X factor of not only the timetable you're on, but then you got to go find other people and have them actually commit and follow through. And so a whole lot of responsibility goes into that. A whole lot of time goes into not only running your own franchise, but also being an area developer. So all these things really have a significant impact on your ability to meet the schedule and to meet the marks so that you can actually make money and not lose money through this endeavor. Well, hopefully this was helpful to you. If you want to know more about buying a franchise, you can always go to my website, Indy, INDY, franchiselaw.com. I have hundreds of blogs. I've got links to this podcast where I've got, I think now this is my 11th episode. So lots of great free information out there. I've got a free ebook titled What to Know Before You Buy a Franchise. And actually, edition 2 of that is going to be coming out here here shortly. So that's kind of exciting. I've got a revised ebook coming out, but still the first edition has a lot of really, really good information, and I think will help you. Again, if you are enjoying this podcast, please go to iTunes, give it a rating and review. It really helps out on the visibility. And thank you again for just tuning in. I so appreciate your support.
Thanks for being with us today on the Franchise Euphoria podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to go to iTunes and provide a review. Also, please remember that although Josh Brown is a licensed and practicing attorney, nothing contained in this podcast should be construed as legal advice, because it is not. The information contained in this podcast is general and educational in nature, and none of it should be relied upon as legal advice. That being said, if you have questions for Josh and would like to contact him, please email him at josh@franchiseeuphoria.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you tune in to our next weekly episode.